thank you for joining us for this a wonderful edition. And I say that because, well, all our editions are wonderful, I hope. But on this particular occasion, we are joined by a dear friend of mine, someone who I've had the pleasure to meet and be treated by many times. I have known Veronica for a long time, which makes me sound old, which I'm really not. I'm not going to do the introduction, though. I'm going to leave that up to Mary, because, of course, I am joined once again by the Coaching Hour assistants, my colleagues, my friends, Mary and Veronica. Hello, ladies.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
This is your cue, Mary.
I share your feelings too, and your experiences. I've known Veronica too. I think I was introduced to Veronica by you and Sina. So it gives me a really great privilege and honor to welcome and introduce Veronica. She's got healing hands. She is a reflexologist. That's what she focuses on. But recently she is she's interested and learning and has many experiences in coaching in relationships, sexual relationships, sexual relationships and couples, and she's doing a fantastic job. And this is something that we don't have. We don't have sexual coaches because it's like, ooh, you know. So welcome, Veronica.
Thank you so much, guys. So lovely to be here chatting with you. And I really appreciate the invitation. So yeah, excited.
Good. Thanks, Veronica. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are looking forward to this topic, and I think it's very important. So we are actually going to focus on navigating communication triggers in relationships because, yes, we tend to trigger one another in relationships, not only with communication, but I guess body language and all of that also counts as communication. But Veronica, before we get into the topic, please tell our listeners who's Veronica and how did you get into the industry or the coaching methodology that you're in at the moment?
Yeah. Who is Veronica? We could do half an hour on just that, I think. Very complex being. No, I'm kidding. So reflexology was something that I was called to when my daughter was little. Just looking for different ways of managing and navigating parenthood, but also just, you know, I found the medical industry to sometimes be lacking in their way of approaching healing. And so I got into reflexology really actually to understand it better because I didn't understand how this worked. Why did it help? And so through my studies and then working with people, I was just blown away and amazed by reflexology and how it really did help. And even though I've been doing it for so many years, I'm still blown away at its ability to actually help and for people's own wisdom and healing to kind of come through the power of reflexology. In the reflexology journey, I decided to focus on infertility, having gone through my own journey with fertility. And it became really, really close to my heart. And so I started to just study a lot more about fertility and understanding this whole journey. And then working with couples, I came to realize there was a piece missing in all the studies I'd done and everything about ovulation and timing, and you know, there was this piece missing around pleasure and around intimacy and couples connecting. So it just became all about having this baby. And I was seeing this again and again and again with people where nobody was asking them the question, but do you even enjoy being intimate with your partner? And so that sent me onto a whole nother path of understanding that a bit deeper. I'd spent a couple of years diving into this area of sexuality, sexual health, sexual education. And then I thought, how do I tell people about this? How do I now deliver this to my clients? And that's where the coaching came in. And I found this incredible program that I have the privilege of being accepted into. And so for the last year and a half, I've just been learning more and more about love, sex, and relationship coaching.
That's interesting. I think we should have a topic only on fertility, but I think we'll park that one for now. because I think it's very important. You know, I myself had a few clients that is struggling through that journey as well.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of triggering, Paul, you've got a question.
Yeah, I was going to go straight in and off the bat ask what the statistics show, because you have made it sound as if you've been led onto this path through speaking to people who weren't perhaps enjoying it as they should, and weren't happy, and weren't enjoying pleasure or the experience in any way. I think whenever there are problems like that in our relationships, we tend to think, oh gosh, I can't talk to anyone because it must only be me. Where when you ask around, perhaps you realize that's not the case. What do the statistics say about the topic you've just led into? How bad is it, if I can put it like that?
On average, couples will struggle 7 years before seeking out help for sexual issues in their relationship. So 7 years of piling on all of this kind of issues around sexuality, and sex is so vital to a lot of relationships, and it means different things to different people. So it doesn't mean that it's not about the amount of times that you're having sex. You know, to clarify, there is no right way to have a sexual relationship in your relationship. It's all about the individual. It's about what the two of you as a partnership have decided upon and then will work towards. But the stats are really showing that people are having, they did a study in the UK, I think it was, where every 10 years, whenever they do the study, people are having less and less and less sex. And then you compile that on with the infertility, where there's so many factors that are contributing to this infertility. We really are living in a very strange time when it comes to relationships and diving into the topic of sex.
There are more and more distractions, aren't there? If I look at my own life, I just, there's very little time for me to do a lot of the things I wish I could do. And by the time you hit the bed at whatever time it is in the evening, which is normally later than you'd like it to be, that's the last thing you're thinking of, because you're just exhausted.
Yeah. But also, again, the communication, what we've been taught about sex growing up, how we approach it. You know, people always say, make this a priority, and, you know, you need to work on this and this and this and this. And it's like, who's teaching couples the importance of intimacy? You know, connecting in that way, why it's important. We're not having these conversations and we're not being taught this. So to just expect us to jump in, you know, to be in a relationship and have all the answers for these things, it's just a really unfair expectation.
So Veronica, what causes this sort of, what can I call it? Like a division or a disconnect or a alienation of intimacy. You know, I don't know if that's the right word, but What is the cause of it?
So this could be an entire, you know, it's such a big, beautiful topic, and it really varies from couple to couple. So when I think I'm speaking, it's in a general sense, but also just for people to realize that not everybody's going to be having the same issues. I think it really starts at bids for connection. People are not realizing their partner's bid for connection. And what I mean by that is when your partner walks into the room, you're doing this, and they're walking in, you know, wanting to start a conversation, and they'll walk in and you haven't even looked up from your phone, right? You're scrolling and you're scrolling and you go, hi. And that partner kind of feels, oh, they're not really wanting to communicate with me now. You've missed a bid for connection. And you're not always going to hit every bid for connection in your partnership, but positivity needs to be doubled in a relationship almost, because we'll feel the negativity more. So even if you've hit 3 bids for connection, but you've missed that one, you're going to feel that one harder, right? So we almost need to have double the volume of positivity in our relationship. So when that negativity does emerge, we're actually okay with it. We can deal and manage with it better. So there is this bid for connection that's being missed within partnerships. And then I think, again, communication. We're not talking to our partners when we feel that, right? So we come in, they've missed that bid for connection, and we'll just turn around and leave. And we're not actually looking at how we're feeling about that. We're not actually then saying to our partner, hey, that really made me feel like you weren't paying attention to me. And then again, because we haven't really been given these skills to be able to have this communication, it's usually like, oh, you're on your phone again, aren't you? Well, I'm actually working, you know, and then we just reactive. We just react, right? Instead of just approaching our partner in a way that's really vulnerable, because it's just like, I don't want to tell them I feel, you know, rejected or sad. They'll think I'm whining. And, you know, so there's all these narratives that just play out in our relationships that I think really contribute to this dive in intimacy. And for me, I truly believe a big part of it is when partnerships are just missing the bid for connection. We're just doing this. And I think like Paul also mentioned, you know, we just climb into bed at night and we are done. We're exhausted. But we're not having the conversations about why it's important for each person in a different way. Intimacy will mean different things for different people in a relationship. Let's have this conversation, decide what we actually want our intimacy to look like, and then work towards that. Let's make it a priority. Let's actually decide that this is important to our relationship and we're going to work towards it. It's not just going to happen.
And
I have to comment on, sorry, on something that you said regarding the 7 years, which is, I don't know if that's anecdotal, if it is statistical, but it does tie in very nicely with the so-called 7-year itch, where so many relationships get there and then collapse. I think my question would also be, what's happening in those 7 years? Because if you're not connecting with your partner, but it's taking you 7 years to get to the point of actually realizing that, I don't think there are many humans who are happy to go for 7 weeks, never mind 7 years, without being intimate in any way. So what's happening?
So definitely creating greater divide, you know, and I mean, I hear what you're saying about 7 weeks, but some people are actually really happy with with longer extended periods. Like I say, it's really different for each person. So just normalizing that. But yeah, it's like pouring battery acid onto a relationship. It just slowly corrodes it. You know, you just see these little bits, and then eventually by the time the couple is just getting so frustrated at each other for every little thing and exploding at every little thing, it's like, oh yeah, now we'll seek help, you know, because initially it was like, oh, it's not too bad. Oh, I can actually manage. And then you go 7 weeks, and then you're going 2 months, you know, then you're going 4 months, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And so by the time people do speak and go find help, it's now this much of a problem. And often intimacy with a partner it's very seldom got to do actually with sex. It's like there's a lot of other layers. That's just a symptom of a bigger problem. But yeah.
That's a good answer, symptom. So what could symptoms be then?
Sorry?
What are some of the symptoms?
So, I mean, as I said, the intimacy or the lack thereof is a symptom of bigger problems within the relationship. So it's usually it underlies, so things like communication, things like triggers, things like self-responsibility within that relationship. We love to blame the other person, right? We're not having sex because of him. No, let's take some responsibility for yourself, right? So that's why I say there really is a lot of underlying building blocks that need to be in place within the relationship for them to have this thriving sex life. And
one of these, sorry, Veronica, one of the, let's say, these building blocks is the communication. Like you just mentioned, you know, if I want to talk to my partner and he's on his phone and the response is, you know, you're just on your phone all the time, instead of doing it in a different way. That's why I think it was important. How do we navigate those triggers? Because it gets to a point, you mentioned that, oh, they'll just think I complain and whine all the time. But that's what they do think. But it's maybe the manner in which you approach it. So how does one navigate? Because communication is your first point of connection. And if the communication is not there and there's constantly we're triggering each other, and later on we just avoid the topic, or I just do my own thing, let my partner do whatever they're doing, then you start living separate lives. So how do we navigate those triggers in a more healthier way so that the person don't think you're constantly complaining?
Yeah. So again, lots of different layers there. I think a big part of this is being honest and truthful with yourself, recognizing the triggers, but not only just saying, oh, my partner's triggering me, like what's underneath that for you, right? So you can come into a situation and your partner's doing this and you're like, oh, I feel so angry. I'm angry at him. And then you're coming at, and immediately, as soon as you accuse a partner, they will be defensive. There is just no other way for them to escape the situation other than being defensive. So it's like, oh, that triggers me. But can we just stop for a moment and recognize why that is a trigger for us? And to not just assume our partners will know. Assumption, I think, is a really dangerous thing to have in a relationship, especially when you've been with somebody for a long time. I hear this a lot from women. I'm not going to bother having that conversation with him because I know what he'll say. And that's really, really, it's sad, actually. And I think a lot of that has to do with not wanting to feel vulnerable in that partnership. Because what if I communicate with my partner and I tell them how I'm feeling, and exactly they just tell me I'm whining? So now I've just been unvalidated. Really, what we want in a relationship is to be seen and to be heard. And that can be scary. That can be really vulnerable, to be in a position where you are speaking out loud how you're feeling. So it's really about creating safety within the relationship, having those pockets of intimacy, those pockets of connection, so that you can also have these conversations. So again, so many layers, like timing. Timing is a big part of communication. If your partner's just come home from work and they're exhausted and they've had a terrible day and they walk through the door and you're like, no matter how sweet or nicely you say, can you please take the garbage out? Your partner's just going to hear more pressure, more things being, thrown on them. They're going to react, they're going to respond. So really, there's so many layers to good communication and so many ways that we can do it in a way that we haven't been taught. And also just understanding that men and women are different. We have different ways of understanding things. And if women often will expect men just to be hairy women, like just feel the way I feel, understand what I'm saying, do the things that women do. And it's like, no, you married a man. So, there's a certain amount of responsibility that you have as a woman to understand that. And for them also in turn to understand, oh, women are kind of different to us, which I think they know.
That has to be, Veronica, I think, the quote of all our coaching hour podcasts ever. That a man is just a hairy woman. I love it. That's brilliant. I will, of everything you've said today, I'll remember that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and that's a problem because we have so many expectations. And I think that's the big thing, because men don't think like women, and
No.
they don't express love the way that we do, because it's always that thing, but if I can do it, or if I can be like this, why can't you be like that? And that's an expectation. So it takes a lot of patience and, I don't know, emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And a willingness, a goal. What's my goal here? I like to think of language as working towards a goal. So the language I use, the way that I say things, what is ultimately my goal here? So if my goal is to have a loving, beautiful relationship with open communication, and I am snippy and nasty and just, am I using my language to achieve my goal? How am I wording things? And it's definitely, men and women, we are so different. We are so different. Beautifully so, uniquely so, but still frustratingly so.
It reminds me of that famous book, the book on love language. And I remember when I first heard about it, I didn't quite get the meaning of it. And then as I read the book and both Zena and I got into it, I think we should have perhaps maintained or given more thought to what we read. But what we read at the time was astounding. And it just makes you understand that we are all speaking a different language in a sense. I think the difficulty, though, with everything that you've said and with the likes of love languages and connecting and making time and the bid for connection, the tricky part is putting it into practical steps and making it accessible and available and usable, because the theory we all get, I say we all, most of us get, we understand, and I'm sure
Yeah.
people watching and listening now, they get it. They're sitting, nodding their heads at home, going, wow, you are spot on. But how do we turn that knowledge into action and making a difference?
So I think, again, it comes down to that goal, right? It's that willingness and wanting to. It's about not also getting despondent when you don't see your partner responding in the way that you want them to. You know, assumption being a really big problem and expectations being another. It's staying true to you. I really feel like relationships bring about the most profound transformation in ourselves by our partners triggering us in the ways that they do, right? So we can learn and grow so beautifully in relationships if we just approach conflict in a way that allows for that growth to happen, not just shying away from it and going, nah, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to deal with that. So putting it into practice, it is difficult. It's not just something that, oh, well, now I've learned all this, I'm going to do it. It's, again, deciding what is my goal here, making it a priority. And if we can do 80-20, there's a good chance that things are going to work out. Because I always kind of say relationships are not just two people coming together. It's two people with sets of parents and grandparents and siblings. And so these two people coming together have influence, triggers, traumas from all of these backgrounds. And then you're like, here we go. Now just make it work. It is extremely difficult. So without looking at all those aspects for ourselves, working on ourselves, understanding our triggers, understanding our vulnerability, our resistance to it. If you're in a partnership and your partner's going, I don't want to do this. There's also the attachment style that comes into it. Looking at that for yourself, like, why don't I want to do this? Like, I myself in my partnership, I'm an avoidant attachment. So I'm like, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to deal with that. And of course, I married someone who's like an anxious attachment, and he's not an avoidance, and he'll be like, let's deal with it. Let's talk about it. And I'm like, ah. And, so this is the dynamic, but we recognize that, we notice that, we know that about ourselves. So as soon as I start avoiding, he's like, oh, there's something here. I'm not going to come in and push, and it's like, we just kind of do this all the time, figuring ourselves out. But we've decided, what do we want? Do we want this to work? Okay, that means we've got to work at working it.
You mentioned something there, Veronica, attachment. And I'm guessing this could be quite a long topic for another day, but is that pivotal to everything that you're talking about?
So attachment styles are also another way, like the love languages. There's a couple of different books on the subject that are really, really good, that have come up with different ways of describing it. There's a beautiful book where they describe people who are in relationships. Like, sometimes you get the island. They just are happy to be by themselves and have nobody near them. And then you get the waves who kind of come in and go like, hey, I want to be in a relationship. Oh, no, wait, this is too scary. I don't. Oh, no, wait, actually, I do. So yes, attachment styles, it's not my area of expertise. There are people who have far more knowledge about this than me, but I have a basic understanding of it. And it is really pivotal also, in my opinion, to understanding our relationships. And it stems from childhood. It's really, really from a very early age. You can see the type of attachment style you will possibly have, but also partners. And then there's the secure attachment, which is, feeling a bit more stable. So you get the anxious, the avoidant, and then the secure. And then there's, branches of that come out as well. And you can be a secure attachment and then be in a relationship with an avoidance, and it can shift your attachment style. So it's also not to say that childhood is everything. But yes, attachment styles also play a very, very big role in how we will then approach our relationships.
It's quite sad if I think of myself, and I would consider myself and my wife to be very well read and fairly knowledgeable. But I tell you, each time I hear a coach on this show talking about relationships, I realize just how little I know. And it makes me think that you should almost go through some sort of relationship coaching before you get married, or before you embark on any serious relationship, because just having a set of skills and knowledge and being able to understand not only your partner, but yourself can make massive strides towards having a healthy relationship. if you don't know this stuff, you can't be blamed for getting it wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, part of my avoidant attachment style is that when my husband travels, and doesn't matter where he goes, what he's doing, when he gets back, I struggle to connect with him again. And it took years for him to realize. He'd be like, aren't you happy I'm home? And I'd be like, I'm so happy. Like, I just can't be near you. Like it was just so bizarre. It was so bizarre for both of us, because I was like, I'm so glad you're home, but also leave me alone, you know, and we played this game. And so now he knows, he jokes about it. He's like, yeah, when I get back, you know, I know you'll ignore me for the first couple of hours. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm just like this. It's so weird. But yeah, by having that knowledge and that information, when we learned about attachment styles, we're like, oh, there we go. There it is. That makes sense. Yeah.
Veronica, what is your take on unconditional love? Because when I, with my clients, and I suggest to them that they need to love and accept their partners unconditionally, there's a lot of resistance there, because it means I need to accept certain things which I don't like or disagree with.
Yeah. So unconditional love, I feel, in my opinion, it's tricky. It's hard, right? It's really, really difficult. I think in some ways we expect our partners to love us the way that our parents would. For me, that is unconditional love. There is nothing my children could do where it's going to shift my love for them. And so to place that vast amount of pressure on a partnership where it's like, no matter what I do, because there are always conditions in a relationship, right? If you're going to beat me up, that's a pretty big condition, right? So I think when we look at unconditional, we need to maybe zoom it in a bit to not unconditional, but within my values, that aligns with my values and my beliefs, right? It's the coreness of who I am. If we're going to work at this relationship, there are certain expectations that need to be met. And those are important, but again, they need to be communicated. They need to be understood, and understanding for yourself why that is something. So a lot of times people can say, I need my partner to do this. And then you start having a conversation, and it's not even about that thing, right? There's something underneath that we need to understand for ourselves. So there is definitely a part of acceptance that I think we need to have in relationships, accepting that that's who they are, you know, in their core, accepting that those are their flaws, accepting that those are their triggers, accepting that that is the way they're going to hear it, regardless of how you're going to say it, they're going to hear it that way. And so there needs to be a bit of a shift within you. So we can have unconditional moments of love where you just completely and totally adore this person regardless. But yeah, I do think the concept and idea of unconditional might be a little bit hard to put an expectation on another human being to just like accept everything. I'm not going to change. Done. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important what you mentioned in terms of the acceptance. I mean, if your husband didn't accept the way that you were, you know, when he comes home from a business trip or whatever, if he were going to constantly expect you to react in a certain way and you don't, it's going to be a problem for the relationship. So I think the unconditional means more the acceptance part, to accept the person and their personality and certain things that you are expecting, which is not part of their maybe relationship style. Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I love that. I love that acceptance. It's definitely, I think, a big part of it.
I think many people also go into a serious relationship or a marriage with the outlook that, don't worry, if there's something that isn't quite right or something that's broken, we'll change, we'll fix it, we'll work on it. And very often in my experience, the leopard never changes its spots, so to speak. You can become a better version of you, and I always find that expression a little bit cliched, but it does sum up what I'm trying to say. But ultimately, the person you have married is still the person you have married, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. So there will be things that you can't change. And so it begs the question, I think, with so many couples, why did you get together in the first place? And I know that sounds harsh, but you hear stories in many marriages, many relationships where people get married quickly. They are perhaps forced into a relationship because of a pregnancy, or there's family pressure. You know, certain cultures have a way of arranging marriages and weddings. I think there almost needs to be, we need to sort of go back to basics and actually really spend time and take time and put in the effort to get to know somebody before we go down that road. It's like everything now is instant. You go onto the Take-A-Lot page and you order something, and then you're annoyed if it's not here by latest tomorrow. I feel like we do the same with relationships. We meet somebody, we dive in, we're living together within a matter of weeks or months. And again, to me, it just illustrates how in this modern age, we lack one thing, and that's time.
Yeah. Yeah. Time and priority, right? So even if you're cooking something new, you pull out a recipe book. You take a look, you check the times in the ingredients. What do I need? How do I add this? But then what? Relationships, we're like, I don't need to read a book. It's like this thing that you're doing every day, and we just assume that we'll know how to do it. And I don't think that's always the case. It's about finding people, the right people to have the right conversations with that work for you, because not everything I'm going to say today is going to resonate with everybody, right? So it's like, what works for you? What's going to work in your relationship, and making that decision and working towards that. I think, like, you talk about the change. If you think about just yourself as a human being, where you thought, I'm not going to eat chocolate this week, you know how hard that is to actually make that little change for yourself. Now you think you can change another human being who doesn't even necessarily want to change. It is just impossible. It's absolutely impossible to impose that kind of expectation. And I think, Veronica, you spoke exactly about that, the expectation that we have on our partners. It's just, it's impossible. It's really not achievable.
It's also the assumption.
Yes.
You know, the lack of communication, assuming you should know this about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Been with me this long, you should know how I feel.
Yeah. Because we also stop learning about our partners in a lot of ways, because we think we do know. We think, oh, it's been long enough. And this is why, for me, this is something I'm so passionate about, because I feel like if I'd had this knowledge 10 years ago, how much could have changed, how much further I could be in my own growth. Obviously, things happened the way they did because they were meant to, but the more I'm learning and the more I'm reading and the more I'm like, why wasn't anyone telling me this? Just giving me one book, just one of these books would have just opened up so much for me. There's a beautiful book that just came to mind, The Queen's Code, where she talks about the differences between men and women, and how in a lot of ways the idea of women, like, I will do it myself, has just created this like world where we're not communicating correctly with our partners, because we're just coming at it with this attitude of, I can do it, I don't need you. And then our partners are feeling that, and they're going, oh, okay, well, I want to help, but she won't let me help. And so it's like, just even that one book would have changed so much for me about changing my perception and the way that we look at our partners.
What would you say would be the criteria for someone who could benefit from you as a coach, Veronica, in terms of couples? What would I have to be going through at the moment? Because this relationship obstacle course, let's call it that, there are so many different layers. It's like an onion. You just peel one back and there's another one. And obviously not every coach serves every purpose, and there are different modalities. Mm-hmm. But the idea of having you as part of our show today is also to give you a chance to kind of promote and talk about what you do. So where would I need to be in my relationship at the moment, whether I'm a man or a woman, to be able to benefit from coming to see you?
My initial reaction response is like, anywhere. But really, I truly believe that it's not about, this is my problem, can she fix it? It's about, what do I want? I don't know what I want. Let's explore that together, right? So the way that my coaching works is not that somebody's coming to me with this problem. Yes, that could be the initial thing that jumpstarts them into coming to see me. And then we can rather look at working towards a desire. Let's work towards a goal. Let's work towards something that you want instead of looking and focusing on this thing you don't want. You know, where thought goes, energy flows. So let's work towards a goal. And as we're doing that, you'll notice blockages will come up. Triggers will start to present themselves. A lot of women are dealing with, and men, so let me not generalize there, unworthiness. They don't feel they deserve this. So they will put blocks in their own way to make sure that they almost don't achieve that. We also get so tightly wound into our little boxes, right? This is the box I'm in. This is the box he's in. And that's where we will stay. So yeah, the coaching is just about unpacking a lot of that, just allowing people to realize these things for themselves. We all have the wisdom. We have the know-how. The answers are within us, because once we tap into us and who we are, it's endless, right? We can recognize and see all these other things that are happening around us. So yeah, really, as I say, I have a special interest in sexology and sexual health, in understanding your own sexuality better, but also really the relationship aspect of that comes into play hugely. So even somebody who's single and wanting to get into a relationship, well, let's look at what kind of relationship you want to get into. What do you want that to look like? Unpacking these things like attachment styles and love languages, and yeah, so really just anybody who wants a deeper understanding and sense of self. And within my coaching, we also do breath work. We do somatic, you know, so it's a somatic base. So we're looking at breath work. We're looking at what's going on the body, not just what's happening in the mind.
So what do you mean about the body? What can go on in the body?
So many things. So I think being a body-based therapist initially has really opened my eyes to how much is in the body, how much we don't even feel or allow ourselves to feel in the body. We get so conditioned to just keep moving on. We notice a feeling, oh, it's not important. We'll push it down, we'll suppress it, we'll put it into these places. And once you start exploring the coaching, and I'll maybe give an example, your partner says something and you feel angry, right? Then let's bring that scenario into the coaching, and I will say, where in your body do you feel that anger? And you might go, you know, scanning your body, checking it, and you're like, oh, what? I just felt this weird thing in my chest. Okay, what is that? Let's explore this piece that's inside of you. Because when we hear things, it resonates in our bodies respond. Fight or flight. We say, I felt weak in the knees. You know, all of the language we use around emotions is always tied to the body. And yet we don't explore that part of ourselves. So the coaching really allows you to drop into that and to get clarity on that, explore that. Like, let's see what is actually there. And sometimes you can say like, oh, this piece actually feels like it's been there for a really long time. And you get this memory of this thing that happened when you were 3. And, you know, this is just an example of how maybe the somatic coaching works in the body. And then you're like, oh, but I can feel it lifting. You know, once we witness a lot of these things, it changes the way that it's presented in our lives. And then we can use breath work to move that. We can use sound, liberating our sound, you know, just speaking up for ourselves. It's so important. A lot of people really struggle within the coaching setting, and I'll say, shout it, and they're like, you know, there's like no sound. We just don't know how to be loud. We don't know how to take up space. And it's like, yeah, let's do that. So liberating the voice is another way that we move emotions through the body, through movement, you know, through shaking. And we very much like, we sit here, we do this, we go to that. It's like, no, let's move, let's shake, let's dance, let's feel, let's allow the emotions to actually flow and move through the body. So there's a lot of different ways. Each individual person will have a different way that they resonate with when it comes to in the body emotions.
I love the way you explained that. It is so beautiful, you know.
Thank you.
So, Veronica, to wrap up today's session, what last thought or something that you can leave with the listeners in terms of those navigating those triggers?
So I think what I would love to leave, it's a pearl of wisdom, and it's by, again, people much wiser and far more experienced than me. It's the Gottman Institute. They've come out with this beautiful way of having what they refer to as a soft starter when it comes to conflict and having hard conversations with our partners. So the way that they refer to this, it's like a 3-step process. I feel. So what you're feeling, what your experience is about the situation, and that situation isn't you are at work all day long, right? It's like, no, what is the situation actually? I miss you and I haven't seen you for a while and I feel like we don't spend time together, and then offering a solution. And I think maybe the answer to this is that we prioritize time together doing X, Y, and Z. So when you feel like you want to communicate with your partner, go in with this recipe, so to speak, with this idea already. Okay, soft starter. I feel, what is the emotion? What is the situation? And what is the solution? And just experiment with that in different ways. So that for me, I feel is so important to know how to have the hard conversations.
So it's I feel
about the situation and the solution. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the solution?
And again, the situation, we're not going to attack, we're not going to blame, we're not going to shame, we're going to, what is the situation? Let's look at it at its core. And that takes some self-reflection, right? Because what do I feel? You know, instead of going, you're spending all day at work and you're not here with me, and I'm with the kids, and wow. No, what do I feel? I feel lonely. I feel abandoned. Why do I feel that? Because you're at work? No, because we're not spending time together. You know, and it just shifts that from blaming, because immediately your partner has to defend. As soon as you come in blaming, there's a defense that has to happen. So yeah, it's just changing the language that we use and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. And I mean, there's so much more, you know, that we could go into, like mirroring your partner, not acknowledging, understanding, providing that back to your partner. So when they're saying, I feel, and they're being vulnerable with you, taking a pause, letting them finish their conversation before you answering, and then seeing if you can really mirror that back to your partner. I hear that you feel lonely. I hear that you feel abandoned. I understand that I'm at work all the time and we're not spending time together. You know, there again, there's your mirroring, there's your understanding, there's your acknowledging. I acknowledge you feel like this. I agree. Let's work out a way. Let's have a plan in place. I think if couples could have deals and plans around things that are sticky and icky, it can really go a long way to removing that assumption. Assuming he knows to take the trash out. That's setting yourself up for disaster, right? So let's have a conversation. I feel when you don't take the rubbish out, you know, and like, let's do this. Let's have this conversation. And what deal can you make around that? Well, if I remind you once, if I remind you on Tuesday, will you not feel like I'm nagging you? But will you do it when I remind you? Because it provides for me a sense of giving. You're actually providing for me, right? And then in that, you're not nagging. You're having a conversation around something that you've already made a deal about. So those fights that are repeated and repeated and repeated, let's make a deal. Let's make a plan. How are we going to approach this next time?
When I rub my ear, you must put the rubbish out.
Exactly. When I call you darling, you better run, because I'm about to get like go insane.
I think
Very powerful.
I think we should have another session. Don't you, Veronica?
Absolutely.
That's if it's, you know, okay with you, Veronica.
Oh, I would love it. I will talk about this. You might notice for a very long time. I could probably do half an hour just on making deals and plans, right? On how to approach navigating negotiations within a relationship. But yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Veronica. Thank you so much for joining us. We have to leave it there for today because otherwise we quite literally would go on for a couple of hours. So we do appreciate your time. Thank you for watching and for listening. And Veronica, yeah, as we're going to take you up on your promise there, or your offer, should I say, to be available to us. I think you've
Lovely.
been a
Thank
wonderful
you.
guest. I think you've got some fantastic insights to share, and a lot of it is really very practical, and I think will help straight away, which is the kind of content that we enjoy, because people can start implementing things immediately and see a change in their lives. So thank you for changing our lives. We appreciate it, and we look forward to your company in the next one.